Another day, another story. On September 4, 2024, a tragic shooting occurred at Apalachee High School in Barrow County, Georgia, resulting in the deaths of 4 people and injuring several others. The victims included 2 students and 2 teachers. The suspected shooter, a 14-year-old student, was arrested shortly after the incident. The suspect used an AR-style rifle during the attack, and early investigations revealed that authorities had prior warnings about the individual, who had previously made threats against other schools. 9 additional people were hospitalized following the shooting. Here's what we know. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. Victims. The 4 people killed have been identified as Mason Schermerhorn, a 14-year-old student Christian Angulo, a 14-year-old student Richard Aspinwall, a teacher Christina Irami, a teacher. The adults killed were both math teachers, and Aspinwall was also an assistant football coach, according to the school's website. 9 other people, 8 students and 1 teacher, were wounded and hospitalized, all of whom are expected to survive. Suspected shooter. The suspected gunman has been identified as Colt Gray. Gray will be charged with murder and tried as an adult. Gray was questioned by law enforcement last year regarding several anonymous tips about online threats to commit a school shooting at an unidentified location and time, according to FBI Atlanta and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. At that time, there was no probable cause for arrest. Student Lila Sayarath said the suspected shooter left the classroom at the beginning of their Algebra 1 class around 9:45 a.m. When he returned near the end of the class, he knocked to get back in. Another student went to open the door, but Lila said that student noticed the gun and didn't open the door. She said the shooter went to the classroom next door and opened fire. The Sheriff's Department received the first reports of the shooting around 10:20 a.m. Law enforcement arrived shortly after those calls, in addition to 2 school resources officers assigned to Apalachee High. A resource officer confronted the shooter, who immediately surrendered to the deputy and was taken into custody, Barrow County Sheriff Judd Smith told reporters. When the shooting happened, all schools in the district were placed in lockdown, and police were sent out of an abundance of caution to all district high schools. The FBI and the ATF were later on the scene working with local and state officials, Attorney General Merrick Garland said. The investigation. There were no reports of secondary incidents or scenes, law enforcement sources told CNN. The gun used in Wednesday's shooting was an AR platform weapon, according to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation director. A law enforcement official told CNN earlier it was an AR-15 style rifle. Apalachee High School had received a phone threat earlier in the morning warning that there would be shootings at 5 schools and that Apalachee would be the first, multiple law enforcement officials told CNN. GBI Director Chris Hosey said there's no evidence of other schools being targeted, but investigators are pursuing any leads of any potential associates of the shooter that was involved in this incident. At this point, there's no evidence that any additional shooter was involved, and no evidence of a list of schools being targeted, Hosey said. Schools in the county will be closed for the week while the investigation plays out. The shooting at Apalachee High School in Winder, GA, on Wednesday killed 2 teachers and 2 students, becoming the deadliest episode of school violence in the state's history. At least 9 others were injured. The authorities identified the dead students as 2 14-year-olds, Mason Schermerhorn and Christian Angulo. The educators killed were identified as Richard Aspinwall and Christina Irami, officials said. Spellings of the names were not confirmed by the authorities. Law enforcement officials said in a news conference that the victims taken to the hospital were expected to make a full recovery. Those that are deceased are heroes in my book, said Chris Hosey, director of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Those that are in the hospital recovering right now are heroes in my book. Mason Schermerhorn was described by friends of his family as a lighthearted teenager who liked spending time with his family, reading, telling jokes, playing video games and visiting Walt Disney World. He had recently started at the school. He really enjoyed life, said Doug Kilburn, 40, a friend who has known Schermerhorn's mother for a decade. He always had an upbeat attitude about everything. Louis Briscoe, a co-worker and friend of Schermerhorn's mother, said the boy and his family were looking forward to an upcoming vacation there. When Mr. Briscoe learned about the shooting at the high school in the afternoon, he called Schermerhorn's mother to ask if everything was okay. She told him, "Mason's gone. My heart just dropped," said Mr. Briscoe, 45. He added, "Nobody should have to go through this type of pain." The gunman, who the authorities identified as a 14-year-old student at the school, will be charged with murder, officials said. Students heard gunfire as they barricaded themselves in classrooms. The shooting has shaken residents in Winder, which has about 18,000 residents and is roughly 50 miles northeast of downtown Atlanta. At the high school, Ms. Iremi and Mr. Aspinwall were math teachers. Mr. Aspinwall was also the football team's defensive coordinator. David Phoenix, a math special education teacher and the school's golf coach, was injured during the shooting. Katie Phoenix, his daughter, said in a Facebook post on Wednesday that he was shot in the foot and hip, shattering his hip bone. He arrived to the hospital alert and awake, she wrote in the post, adding that he had surgery earlier that day. Biden calls for gun safety legislation. The White House said in a statement that President Joe Biden had been briefed on the shooting, and his administration will continue coordinating with federal, state, and local officials as we receive more information. Jill and I are mourning the deaths of those whose lives were cut short due to more senseless gun violence and thinking of all of the survivors whose lives are forever changed, Biden said in a statement, calling on Republicans to work with Democrats to pass common-sense gun safety legislation. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party nominee for president, called the shooting a senseless tragedy. "We've got to stop it. We have to end this epidemic of gun violence," Harris said at the start of a campaign event in New Hampshire. Former President Donald Trump, the Republican nominee for president, wrote on social media that, "Our hearts are with the victims and loved ones of those affected by the tragic event in Winder, GA. These cherished children were taken from us far too soon by a sick and deranged monster." Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp, asked at a press conference what could be done to prevent shootings, said, "Today is not the day for politics or policy. Today is the day for an investigation, to mourn these precious Georgians that we have lost." The shooting was the first planned attack at a school this fall, said David Reedman, who runs the K-12 school shooting database. Apalachee students returned to school last month. Many other students in the U.S. are returning this week. The U.S. has seen hundreds of shootings inside schools and colleges in the past 2 decades, with the deadliest resulting in over 30 deaths at Virginia Tech in 2007. The carnage has intensified the pitched debate over gun laws and the U.S. Constitution's Second Amendment, which enshrines the right to keep and bear arms. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.